Metropolis initiative. There was a very interesting initiative between Durban and Sao Paulo that I think can be the base for discussing wider what are the possibilities of a more global national housing policy. In the case of Durban and Sao Paulo, I think it started as an experience of what we normally call in UCLG peer-to-peer learning. These are experiences where a group of experts and people from one city works together with people and experts of other cities, and in a sense is sometimes I say that learning is not an easy thing to do, and it takes a lot of time. Sometimes people would like to have kind of miracles about learning, and there is no miracle in learning. It takes time, and it's time investing, resources investing, and then in our case we have discovered that in a network like Metropolis or UCLG, finally what we call peer-to-peer learning or mutual learning is probably one of the best tools that we can use. In this case, this tool has been used to see how experiences from Sao Paulo and Durban can be exchanged, how the shared experience and the good practices can be done. And I think that that example, that project that will be explained by one of our speakers, and then would be possible also to have some recommendations on policies, housing policies for fast-growing countries. So we'll have one speaker from Sao Paulo, one speaker from Durban, and then one speaker from India. So in a sense, the idea is that there is first an explanation of the Sao Paulo, the Durban Sao Paulo project, then a reaction from the grassroots on how some of the ideas that may come out could be applied as well to India. So without more introduction, let me give the floor first to Laura Han, who is senior architect in Durban.
Please, sir.
And she will present the overall framework of the project that was done between Durban.
Thanks, Joseph. I'm looking for my presentation on the screen, as well as a remote to change the slides. I'm an architect, so it's a lot more fun with some pictures. Should I start? Is the microphone on? Yeah? Thank you, Josette, for your introduction. And a very warm thanks to Metropolis organization for their generous support to the eThekwini municipality in Durban, South Africa, and the City of Sao Paulo mentorship program. This learning exchange has created a platform for in-depth discussion on all aspects of affordable housing and city building. It has shifted our perspectives and our practice of housing provision. My first experience of meeting the Brazilians was picking them up at the airport in Durban and taking them on a short detour to show off Durban's flagship project called Conubia. Conubia had been rapidly planned over a very short period of 6 years. It's a large-scale greenfields development made possible through a public-private partnership. It will ultimately create 25 homes in medium-rise, medium-density neighbourhoods, integrated with mixed-use development offering local economic employment and supported by a bus rapid transport system. Looking out over the first rows of subsidised houses under construction in Canubia, our Brazilian friends shook their heads and said, "We made this mistake 30 years ago." Over the next 2 years, we have explored our mutual mistakes as well as our successes through a practical focus on a project called Welbedacht in Durban. I will outline our key recommendations coming out of this project to date, and by no means is it concluded, it continues. While Canubia will yield 5 times the city's average residential density of 15 units per hectare, the majority of housing projects, including Welbedacht and other projects currently in the planning phase within the eThekwini municipality in Durban, have not been as well considered or as well resourced. The reasons for this include financing for higher density being slightly more expensive than a more low-rise solution, expectations around land ownership, the symbolism of land ownership in a post-apartheid South African context, and cultural resistance to flats. Sao Paulo shared their approaches to urban housing, and 3 principal strengths resonated with our situation. They developed human settlements through an ambitious and diverse programmatic response with strong policy, budget, institutional, and planning integration. They focus on in-situ upgrading, tapping into homeowners' contributions to building and financing, and protecting existing community networks. They invest in very well-defined projects prepared by diverse skills, including social workers and urban designers, as well as architects, and high-quality social facilities alongside the basic services. This is the kind of project that they had moved towards after making the mistake that we are currently making in terms of a lower density solution in our flagship project. Welbedacht is typical of the Durban metropolitan area, which is characterized by low-income housing in peripheral locations with very low-density, sterile environments. There has been very poor cooperation, integration, and institutional linkages, with skill sets delivering maximum numbers of free houses for all through a national government capital housing subsidy scheme, with very little regard for the social context. The project of Welbedacht began in 2002 as a combined greenfields and informal settlement upgrade project as part of a slums clearance program. Land was acquired from private owners by the eThekwini municipality, and the project has improved the living conditions of 4,600 families previously residing in different informal communities. 30 different informal communities were relocated to this project area of Welbedacht. Implementation of housing is still underway in the Welbedacht area in a phased development, and the project provides skills and job opportunities through the building construction. The problem posed by the pilot project was to accommodate an additional 1,000 households on the last remaining 150 vacant plots within the approved town plan layout and using the available subsidy funding. Solving this problem required extensive review of the plans, planning, and environmental policies and building standards. Most importantly, all possible solutions required getting relevant and updated data on which to base any planning decision, and resident stakeholder inputs were central to obtaining that data and in making those decisions. Let's talk a little bit about citywide housing strategies in the eThekwini municipality. A 5-year housing sector plan outlines the city's housing policy and its implementation plan. It articulates a housing prioritization list across the metro area in relation to accessibility and project readiness, and aims for a housing and tenure mix, including upgrading, greenfields, and rental housing. The graphs here show the kind of prioritization of projects and still the majority of projects on the right-hand side graph showing their relative distance from public transport routes, and a predominance of informal settlement upgrading programs as opposed to greenfields development. The fear is that this plan defaults to numbers supplied in response to a 400,000 unit backlog at the expense of a more integrated and sustainable planning approach. The housing plan must be communicated more widely to ensure and maintain multi-departmental involvement and integration in housing delivery, as well as that of external parties. It is dependent on reviewing and updating urban legislation as often as possible to meet its planned requirements. The rental housing policy intent is to speed up urban transformation, but its implementation is currently stuck by overregulation, shortage and cost of available land, and subsidies eroded by inflation. We need policies to overcome these barriers, as rental accommodation seems to offer the most important solution in terms of densification. There is a top-down approach in housing delivery, and we appear to have lost our skills and commitment to community participation, evidenced by a complete absence of social workers and social technicians informing housing planning and design. I'm from the NGO sector originally, and we wouldn't move without having a community meeting, and this seems to be something quite foreign in local government, and I'm quite saddened by that. I'm also very impressed with the work done by our Indian colleagues around on-the-ground engagement with communities, particularly around slum upgrading. The Velbedacht pilot project partnered with the University of South Africa via internships with student social workers and brought capacity and expertise through dialogue with citizens. Simple technology and tools provided accurate local knowledge, built necessary relationships, and gave unique local solutions without cost, but with considerable impact. A social strategy will have to take into account all environmental aspects, including waste management, public spaces, local economic development, health, education, maintenance, and operations. And the inclusion of full-time qualified social workers, as in the Sao Paulo and now in the Durban pilot, can prove invaluable in planning and developing in a practical, needs-based way. So the challenge of this pilot project was to try to accommodate a greater number of people, 1,000 more families that were requiring accommodation in the area, people that had missed out on the first round, and extended families requiring individual housing and also eligible for the housing subsidy. So the densification strategy for Velbedacht sees an additional 2,000 units achievable within the project footprint. This involved identification of additional land within the existing layout and proximity to a future bus rapid transport route, a review of earlier space standards and unallocated non-residential sites which had remained vacant over the past decade. Drafting a new public housing sector zone which relaxed existing town planning controls for lower income housing and its consolidation was probably the single most important thing that we did in the past 2 years, and hopefully this will be embedded within the Durban town planning schemes and go forward to create the same approach in other public sector housing projects. An important and controversial component of new type of planning was looking at increased pedestrianization and a reduction in parking requirements. These kind of decisions were made after a very in-depth socioeconomic survey in the area, which showed that only 10% of residents had or used a car. We clustered public facilities sites in a more land and operationally efficient public precinct. We introduced new housing typologies based on those at Canubia, but designed for a greater unit adaptability. One of the shortcomings of the Canubia project is that the houses are very difficult to extend over time, and culturally we see a lot of families living in an extended family arrangement, and with the shortage of housing supply, it's often necessary for a household to build a secondary unit on the same site for a young family member. So new housing typologies were designed very much to adapt to slope conditions. We were going onto steep slopes that had previously not been developed, and also to allow for the house to extend in a logical way that could also accommodate home industries and non-residential space within those sites. An innovation which still needs to be explored is an emphasis around incentivizing existing residents, not only in Velbeduk, but across the city, to subdivide their large sites. Sao Paulo challenged the assumption that quality design by architects of human settlements was expensive and slowed delivery of housing. Considered design can and must give housing more utility, value, and potential. Designs must adapt to changing needs over time and accommodate home-based livelihoods, as well as rental opportunities within that property. Investment in public space, safe pedestrian routes, and recreational facilities and buildings need not be a drain on scarce resources. The inclusion of modest infrastructure, such as these shown here, and multi-use public buildings shows commitment to lower income areas and builds civic pride. So very, very simple and quite fun landmarks within these rather sterile environments, places where people can meet, places that offer opportunity for trade, as well as socializing and for community groups to practice their interests. In the case of Velbeduk, there's an active chess group, as well as a soccer team and a poetry group. Here we see pedestrianization of a very busy crossroads intersection where there had been a number of car accidents and children getting hurt at this busy intersection. It's a landmark in this very monotonous context, and a simple design for creating a sense of place where people can wait and trade and meet their friends is a very cost-beneficial intervention. At a broad scale, we subsidize the housing demand side only, while it's needed on the supply side to incentivize private sector involvement from both housing associations to beneficiaries themselves. Funding options are required to support the required social inputs and to facilitate community participation through the housing process and into its management. Low-income households require improved access to finance and interest rate subsidy. If we think about partnerships, local governments must enable action directed at establishing agencies, communities, and civil society organizations to achieve cohesion in the housing program and to integrate social programs, employment generation, and the creation of new programs for women's issues, special needs, and the inclusion of the elderly. Discussions on densification funding, joint budgeting and implementation between the eThekwini municipal government and the provincial government will deliver on public facilities, principally around education and health facilities. There is a need to shift from ad hoc to a programmatic approach and to articulate a cohesive set of large-scale human settlement programs for housing, economic and social facilities, engineering services, accessibility, and environment, together with intensive participation around outputs and budget planning. Cities need to encourage willingness and capacity to review and upgrade and update housing and related sector plans, policies, and standards is very important. There is scope for innovation on land regularization, and it is possible that be guided by indigenous systems in our area. Developing wide project preparation pipelines and wide land assembly pipelines with dedicated human resources and clearly defined organizational structures will mean that there are more projects eligible to enter implementation than there are resources. This will go a long way in safeguarding adequate housing provision within a rapidly growing urban area. As in Brazil, emphasis should be on the need for human settlement policy to be directly linked with that of national economic development policy for positive macroeconomic effects, rather than just addressing the sector planning and technical challenges in isolation. Human settlement upgrades and developments must be specifically designed to stimulate various sectors of the economy, ranging from property markets to green buildings and renewable energy, as well as the churn of expenditure to stimulate neighborhood economies. Investment in human settlement for macroeconomic benefit, rather than as a social service, should free up different sources of government funds. To conclude, closing this current pilot project phase will finalize the planning and building approvals as we move into the big implementation phase of the new housing and the public precinct. My principal hope is that the impact of this pilot on the direction of local and national human settlement policy will see a renewed emphasis on end-user participation in growing their cities. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go now to Sao Paulo. Tiago Soares Barbizan, who is of the housing architect of the City of Sao Paulo Housing Department.
Can I go on? Yeah. Firstly, I would like to thank Metropolis and the team of NIUA for organizing this session, and to greetings for the other panelists and my friends from Durban. As a result of the UCLG Urban Strategic Planning Learning Exchange held in 2011, it was established a mentorship program between eThekwini, Durban, and São Paulo, focusing on the São Paulo experience in informal settlements upgrading. This exchange was focused in Velbeda East, as Laura explained, and with the attempt to sharing and showcase the creation of a sustainable human settlement. In this partnership, São Paulo shared and exchanged information, skills, and experience on servicing and upgrading precarious settlements, as well as in building participatory processes through a comprehensive social work. São Paulo has 11 million people, and in its metropolitan area, it reaches 22 million people. 3 million people are living in precarious settlements, which are slums, illegal allotments, and tenement houses in downtown. We have more than 1,000 favelas, slums, and 1 million people living on them. And the housing deficit is around 200,000 housing units. So we knew the challenge we had to face, and we started mapping all the settlements so we could have an idea on how to prepare a strategy for it. So for that, we needed to create some criteria to prioritize in which settlement to act first. So first, it was the settlements that were placed on risk areas, or if they had or no access to infrastructure, the social vulnerability of those families living in the settlements, and public health figures related to child mortality, premature mortality, and diseases. So with all this, when we gathered all this information, it was possible to create the municipal housing plan in which we could build a database of settlements and start creating a strategy for each one of them. So our plan goes until 2024, as you can see, and it is for approval at our city council now. So when we were organizing our presentations, it was discussed that it should be enriching to share what we have done regarding zoning in São Paulo. And one tool that we have in São Paulo that allows us to establish such kind of program of informal settlements upgrading, it's that the land should have a social function. So it should not be empty, vacant, and without no use. That's why it was created, the ZEIS, which is special zones of social interest, and they are divided in some subcategories. The ZACE 1 is for areas that are occupied by informal settlements. The ZACE 2 are empty or abandoned land that has no use, and it's well located with good infrastructure in its surroundings. The ZACE 3 is the same, but related to buildings that are vacant. And the 4 are plots of land in environmentally protected areas. So here you can see an example of slum, 2 actually, Recanto dos Humildes and Paraisópolis, which are located in ZACE number 1, because they are informal settlements and they are occupied land. So the first picture, it's before the intervention, during the works for upgrading, and the last picture, it's after the intervention. This is development located in ZACE 2. As I said, it's empty and vacant land with good infrastructure. The ZACE 3, it's a group of, it can be a group of empty or vacant buildings or a building itself that must be used for social housing. And the ZACE 4, which is close to environmentally protected areas. So from when we had this first law, that it was the master plan from 2004, this was the map of ZACE. So this is São Paulo, and you can see all the colored areas are ZACE. So you have, we had at that time 964 perimeters of ZACE, mainly on the periphery, which are, all the red spots are the favelas, the slums. And so this was our guidelines since 2004. But last year, we had to revise and build a new master plan for São Paulo. And during this process, there were settled a lot of mechanisms to ensure participatory process in the revision of this master plan. And then it was mapped new ZACE around the city with, during workshops and seminars with social movements related to housing. They were telling us, the municipality, which areas should be marked as ZACE, because they wanted to assure that land for their developments and for their community. So throughout 1.5 years, it was a long process of seminars on holidays and Sundays and workshops, gathering the information from each community in each region of São Paulo and discussing it with universities, with the city council, to build a new map of ZACE. And we came up with this one that was just approved in July. And as you can see, it has a relevant new areas marked as ZACE, as we jump from 900 to more than 2,000 new perimeters. So the main concept I would like to share with you is that once you have a bank of land, of available land for social housing, you need to ensure that this land will not be used for something else, that we will have its real use for social housing. So this is a strong tool. Our social movements, they reach us for meetings and to request attention for their problems, and they know in which ZACE they would like to have their community to live on. Now that we have this new map of ZACE, we are going through the process of mapping the demand of the city. Who are those families? We already have a database, but we would like to know exactly where they are living and if they are living close to one of the new developments that we are planning. So we are building this new map in which you can see these buffer zones are areas that has projects which are financed by the municipals from the state or from the federal level. And we are trying to match. So how many days we have inside each of these buffer zones, who are the families who are living here, and where they can go. So this is our goal that we want to achieve, in which a family who is living in a precarious settlement, already in a ZACE, in a special zone of social interest, they could stand on that area and where they have their social networks, where they have been living there for more than 20 or 30 years. We would not like to take these families and take them to the periphery or far away from their home. So that's what we are working right now. And this tool, this zoning tool, was really enabling for that. And all this methodology of creating our municipal housing plan, creating these criteria, this legislation for zoning, it was the main tools that we shared with our colleagues from Durban, and it's very impressive what the team back there in São Paulo is able to achieve right now, because the pressure from the social movements is really strong, and we have to listen to that and to have a good answer for that. So that's it, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In a recent meeting of foundations that were discussing how to partner to disrupt inequality in cities, one of the answers was that the public sector had to be mandated to expand opportunities for low-income people, and that city governments holds the key to innovation. They bring authority, credibility, and platform. We have seen two cases linked together. Started with a global as a kind of learning process, but trying also to go to the bottom. Okay, at least participatory planning, integration planning, social issues related, but we want to see the other side. You know, we are always trying. Probably the most difficult thing is to bring, you know, what someone has called the knowledge from the margins. And I think that we have a speaker with us that can do that. Renu Costa is director of Cure India, and I think he can give us the view from the grassroots, from the bottom up, to see how it links with the role of the local governments. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Reinterpreting affordable housing and de-slumming cities is a hard task. It's hard to reinterpret affordable housing for the poor because there's a lot of chatter and noise that's going on about affordable housing today, and I think that drowns out sanity that would allow us to deal with the problem a little more charitably, let me put it like that. Less than 50% is what has been achieved today in terms of housing for the poor in India. This is 50% of what was estimated as the housing backlog in 2007 when the JNNURM, the National Urban Renewal Mission for Affordable Housing, including affordable housing, was launched. If I add the expected or estimated backlog, we've been hearing that the cities are growing, India is urbanizing. We will probably have 12 million houses in the next decade, which would need to be, built or provided for. So the backlog's going to jump up to almost 90 to 95%. What is the reason that we have not been able to meet our targets? Very clearly, our model has depended on land. Land is hard to procure. Land is usually very fringy where it comes to slums. It's outside the city's perimeters. It's hard to, it's expensive to procure that land. We are also handicapped by a legacy. Our legacy practices, which tend to follow a certain format, a certain inflexibility creeps into this format and becomes the reason for us not to be able to deliver on our goals. So therefore, some interpretation becomes mandatory and inevitable, where housing should be incorporated within our strategies and policies as an equity measure. It has to nest within the larger urbanism, the larger format, the larger contours of urban development, urban planning, urban architecture, implementation plans. So the housing must be nested within this if we want to create inclusive cities, and and inside this must rest this notion, this idea that a city belongs to all, and that the poor have as much a right to be living in these cities as we all do. To change our practices, we will need to do some disruptive and some innovative thinking, or what Cure likes to call some unthinking, and to broaden our bandwidth. We need to have a mindshare where we need to bring together all the full ecosystem of housing. For Cure, housing is an ecosystem that comprises basic services of water, basic services of sanitation, drainage and their discharge and treatment systems, and the goals of livelihoods and the goals of health and education. So for us to, we need to glue all these things together, and each aspect may need to be unbundled, may need to be treated individually and sectorally, yet somehow the package needs to be kept glued together, and a new attractive vision of housing is what planners need to create for the poor. We are the Center for Urban and Regional Excellence, CURE. We are a development organization. Our home is in slums. We work with slum communities. We listen to their voices, and we draw our experiences from what they tell us. And our lessons tell us that housing should grow by incrementality, that housing should be something that people should be able to make as and when and how they need to do that, and a step at a time. And they could add to what is existing, not tear down what people have invested in and rebuild a whole new, housing colony. So for us, toilets become the perfect entry point into an additional, growing into housing by addition. A new housing mats is there, and toilets have become the solution around which people then are able to build their houses. So if we have to reconstruct housing in this format, there would be a couple of things that we would need to deal with to address. First of all, we have to recognize that the informal and the irregular ways in which poor people currently do their housing are a form of organic urbanism. They need to stay. They need to be respected, they need to be supported, and they need to be made capital of. The second thing we need to understand is that people do build incrementally. We all build incrementally. When we need, when we can afford, when we have the space, when we are able to pay back our loans. So we all do that. So housing for the poor must also be housing that doesn't indebt them, that doesn't make them borrow so that they are unable to repay and then they are constantly trying to repay the loans, even though these are subsidized, even though these are hugely subsidized. Even that lump sum initial investment is a huge amount of, it's a drain on the savings of the poor. And when we do offer them loans, but we don't recognize that poor have income insecurities, they do get into financial difficulties, and when it becomes harder for them to repay these loans, housing is easy for them to dispose of. So that becomes an asset, and then it responds to a cliche in the mindsets of people that poor people will dispose of their housing and come back to slum living. The third thing that we need to deconstruct is what I have started calling de-engineering. Current technology options are very, very formal. We are looking at big solutions, grand solutions, big trunk infrastructure. I think there's a laziness about trying to do things differently, or there is a deafness to what people want to do, or there is a fear. There is an unwillingness and a fear among the planners to try and change the way things have been planned so far. So current formats are very, very formal. I mean, today a housing upgrading plan is reviewed from this using the same filters that are used for approving a building using the building plan, building bylaws. And as we are going to get smarter, there are going to be algorithms that are going to be written for doing this kind of an approval. So we have to be a little more careful on how do we engineer some of the housing development. It's possible to simply network the slums from where they are, network them to the city systems, because most slums are on the infrastructure pathways of the city. So it's not a difficult job, and it's not an expensive job, and it can include people within the urban fabric of the city without throwing them out. And also it will celebrate the diversity of the living arrangements of the people better than if we glue everything together into grand solutions. So de-engineering is about being out of the box, breaking out of the grid, and also dealing with the challenge of administrative systems. I think, yes, I will speed up. Because there's a lot that I could share with you. Housing is also about stepping back, and this was about a shared septic tank that Cure built in partnership with the people, which is allowing 300 houses to have their own toilets, connect to the system, and the housing and the toilets themselves are unarchitectured. They're looking at these unstable structures of the people's houses and being designed to fit into that. The impact has been seen amazingly in the city of Agra, where we've seen a multiplication. We've seen one house toilet transform a whole city. Today, the slum upgrading activities that we have done in the city of Agra have actually released the neighborhood energies, not just the energies of the neighborhood, making the neighborhood cleaner, making the neighborhood, not just cleaner, the property prices are up, making people wealthier, but it is also changing the way a city is looking at its poor. Agra, surprisingly, is becoming a caring city. I don't think they are recognizing this, but we can see that as outsiders, that they are beginning to incorporate housing, toilets as part of their larger urban planning activities, which is about dealing with the slum, with the larger city drains, which is about dealing with the large number of houses that are along these large big city drains. So, let me, sorry, I need to, this film is refusing to finish. I'm stuck. So I'll keep talking. If we get on to the next slide, we'll get to see these. So can you help me change it? Yeah, so we need to get to this one. So what the city is doing today is building nearly 4,500 toilets. It is building housing, but more interestingly, it is also trying to customize and retrofit these housing solutions, and it is working with NGOs like us so that we can provide the oversight and ensure that the construction quality is good, long-lasting, and something that is going to be sustainable. It is also incorporating within their plans ideas of water, recharging of ground tables, ecology, hydrology, looking at the whole heritage structure and the context of heritage in Agra, and trying to bring housing conservation, private building housing conservation into their practices. As I said, I'm going to skip this one because community participation and engagement is what we do, and we do believe that this is important and a very, very central part of getting your services right. But it's still a class struggle. It's still a class struggle. Resettlement is still the default option in most cases. I think resettlement too can be done better. We saw the earlier two speakers, and I think it can also incorporate all the green principles of development. In the end, it does improve the commons. If we can improve the commons, we can change the social order, and we can get housing as an income-generating tool, which would then lead to poverty reduction. So inequality is not inevitable. We have to design equality into our city's ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go now to the last speaker. We have Balakrishnan Elangovan from Manila, DG, I said.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm late a little bit because my colleague was supposed to come from Manila, so he held up in some other program. So I'm a substitute for him. So what I can offer to sustainable housing policies, this is a theme we have to convey some messages here. Cities Development Initiative for Asia is a joint program by Asian Development Bank and German government and supported by donors from Sweden, Austria and Shanghai municipal government. What we support, we not only support the sustainable housing but also support the sustainable infrastructure that is pro-poor. So we believe in strengthening the infrastructure, supporting the people living in different areas. That's more significant. So we work with the cities and advise them to prioritize the projects. So as you know that the cities have different mandates. Housing may be one of them, may not be. And how to bring them to provide sustainable housing. If there is no sustainable infrastructure, there is no point in doing service to the poor. Therefore, we focus on working with them to identify the strategic development strategy in place with the city and advise them how this could be definitely useful to pro-poor development, pro-poor agenda. CDA started in 2007 with a focus helping cities to bridge the gap. Because the explanation may be slightly different from housing, but it is invariably related to cities, because cities are the main the promoters of various social harmony and development of infrastructure, including the people, the urban slum people. So I think we more target on helping them to bring to the mark, saying that the CDA is trying to help the city structure the projects in a way that they understand the infrastructure needs of the poor and how to assist them in the process. So we help the cities to structure the projects and to identify the high priority investments. High priority investments led to infrastructure, mainly in targeting pro-poor, then environmental sustainability and the climate change. So as you are aware that in India, that in the next 20 years, you are going to have a big change with the population increasing in the medium-sized cities. We focus on medium-sized cities between 2.5 lakhs to 50 lakhs. That's a 250,000 to 5 million in Asia, with a focus on poor agenda. That poor agenda is one of our main theme, and so we expect in India, assuming that there are cities of 1 million plus. As of now, I was just highlighting before the session, around 54 cities in India with a population of 1 million plus. And we have around 7 cities, more than 5 millions, up to 18 millions, Mumbai, Delhi, Calcutta, Chennai, something like that. So we left with around 47, something like that. Out of that, 12 of them are between the range of 2 to 4 million, and 35 cities with 1 to 2 million are significant value, where we notice the major growing cities now, as of now today, is going to have a high population in next 20 years. That's why CDA want to focus not only in India, 12 countries in Asia. An example of Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Pakistan, then Manila, Philippines. So many places we try to cover with the aim of how to assist the city, including the poor agenda. Now our focus is to help the cities how to structure the infrastructure, including housing, one of the agenda, and to include them as a partner to help them to identify the priorities. As of now, you know that the city development plan already exists that includes housing as one of the component. But again, the priority, in terms of priority, is very difficult, which one you should select as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. CDA step in that stage, try to help them to structure that, whether it's housing, whether it's stormwater, it's a solid waste, it's urban transportation. So we try to structure the infrastructure investment priorities and help them to prepare a pre-feasibility studies. As of now that we know that JNNRM, then the other housing schemes, all focused on preparing a detailed projects report straight away. And as you know that out of 500 DPRs prepared, hardly 200 have qualified to go for the implementation, but still 300 or more than that got stuck actually. But we help them to structure the projects before the DPR level or the feasibility level to take it linking with finance, either national government or international donors, and we try to see that it is being linked properly and implemented to the satisfactory level. So we operating from Manila from 2007 and covering 12 countries. As you see the graphs, then there is a component of slum upgrading around 4%. Because these are the priorities of cities going on urban transport as a major, flood, drainage management, solid waste. We had to pick up on that, but still we have assisted a few cities in South Asia. In India, we have assisted Vijayawada to help them to identify infrastructure projects for the slum upgradation. So one of our key recommendation, now it is declared as a capital of Andhra Pradesh. And we worked with the city to identify the poor agenda and also identified how to provide infrastructure facilities as well as the capital investment plan, but not to involve too many in the voluntary resettlement, but to see the in situ facilities are being provided there. So I think we are picking up from that, but basically we try to help the cities to come up with the idea where including the housing can be one of the priority, where it could be taken forward to link with finance, either national or other donor things. And so far we have covered around 57 cities, covering 85 PFS, and around 38 PFS have been linked to finance, but 4% of them are on the slum upgradation. Around 7.3 billion USD dollars have been exchanged and being implemented, possibly. Yeah, thank you. And because this is a totally different session for us. But however, my message is that the cities are the main actor for the infrastructure as well as the housing. So we are trying to inculcate them how to prioritize this as one of the priority and structure this and see that the poor agenda is being built as part of the program, so that it is properly need to be implemented, and the rest will be taken care by the citizens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have seen a different response to one of the questions that I raised here, saying how to disrupt inequalities in cities. And I think we've seen maybe one answer more relating to the city as a group of people living together as an evolving living organism. And we've seen some experience of the grassroots movements of how they approach the problem. We have seen also, I would say, other approach more on considering the place, the space where they live, and how we approach that from the local level, trying to plan and build and create infrastructure. Probably both things have to get together, and probably that's the only way that we can assure opportunity to have a life with dignity for everybody. So I think that finally the different movements, no matter where they come from, they have at the end the same objective, and probably they are trying to find meeting points on to be more effective. I think that we have now to distribute the memento at the end of the session, and we are in a hurry because it seems that the official session is going to start pretty soon, so the organizers want to do that memento.
Thank you, Chairperson. On behalf of the National Institute of Urban Affairs, I have great pleasure in thanking Joseph Roeg for moderating this session, all the panelists for giving excellent presentations. I'm afraid we were not able to entertain any questions this session because we have a plenary waiting and we all need to go to the next hall. Thank you once again, and as a token of appreciation, I'd like to give a few mementos.
Okay, so we close the session, and we are invited to go to the main hall for the ceremony. Thank you.